wife and I were celebrating our however many years anniversary the other day, and so we did a. By the way, how to win some points right there?
You can't get away with saying however many years anniversary.
Husband of the year.
I know. Listen to the winning husband over here, earning some big points. So I've been hitched to my old lady for a couple of years now. It's going all right. Anyway, no. So we celebrated our anniversary with a staycation, which is an amazing phrase. But we stayed in town and we just went to a hotel room and relaxed for a day, basically. And when we checked in, they're like, "Any special occasion?" We said, "Oh yeah, actually, it's our anniversary." And as a result of that, they sent up chocolate dipped strawberries and wine to our room for our anniversary. And so here was my immediate thought. For about 10 years there, I was sharing hotel rooms with Brad for every comics convention.
Yeah.
Why didn't I say every time I checked in with Brad that it was our anniversary, and then we could have gotten wine and chocolate dipped strawberries? Just two tubby middle-aged guys with bad facial hair checking into a hotel that love each other very much,
Because
that want some chocolate
You don't
strawberries.
want to risk the possibility that instead they're giving you French ticklers or something different than what you're expecting.
I want to stay at the hotels that you stay at.
I know. Danielle's staying at a much trendier hotel clientele than we are. I just think Brad and I, 10 years we could have been having chocolate-covered strawberries,
God,
Brad.
Yes, and then they'd look at the room and they'd go, "Why do you have two double beds?" And we'd have to say, because we're the Dick Van Dyke Show kind of people.
Anyway, it speaks to my cheapness that my immediate thought upon receiving free chocolate-covered strawberries was like, I could have been getting this for a decade. On that note, hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living through comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I am Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Shrive. Shrive? I'm cartoonist of Shrive. That's a very different comic strip. Oh, boy. Cartoonist of Shrive and Sheldon and the co-director of Strip.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. And Dave, do you remember when we first started talking about doing Comic Lab and we started talking about who would you want to have on the show? And we both said in unison, I remember we were on Skype, we said in unison, we looked at each other's face and we said the same exact
Bill Watterson.
name.
Oh, wait, no.
Well, hello.
No, after him. We said Danielle Corsetto is the one that we absolutely have to have on the show. And it is it is a sin that we haven't had you on sooner, but our as you well know, our scheduling has been wonky over the last couple of weeks. But Danielle Corsetto, welcome to Comic Lab.
Oh, gosh, thank you. What an entrance. Jeez.
It is legitimately exciting to have you on, Danielle, because not only, as Brad and I were talking about, and you'll be happy to hear this, we love cartoonists that are not only amazing at their art, which you are, but who also think deeply about the art form and the business, which you do. And so we are uniquely excited to welcome Danielle Corsetto of girlswithslingshots.com onto the show. So give it up in your own home studio right now. Quiet clap for Danielle. I don't know why I was about to say give it up. That's the weirdest thing to say on a podcast. Give it up, everybody. And just silence.
Why don't you just tell them to tip their waiters while they're at it?
All I hear is crickets here.
Well, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole until I find out a little bit of housekeeping from last episode. How was WonderCon?
So, for those that remember, I am a member of the National Cartoonist Society, and I had told Brad that I was only going to do two conventions this year, San Diego Comic-Con and Emerald City Comic-Con. Well, the National Cartoonist Society, sensing change in the wind, has now put out this thing where they get free 20 by 20, sometimes 30 by 20 booth space, or 30 by 10 booth space in different comics conventions around the country. New York Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, WonderCon, C2E2, TCAF, MoCA, I think Emerald City. And National Cartoonist Society members can come and table for free, which I don't know, Danielle, if I mentioned this to you as well. So I went down this weekend with the idea that it was a completely free table, and my out-of-pocket costs were the $1 of gas to get there and the $15 to park. So it was a nice show. For me personally, I had not done any advance work, if you guys know what I mean by that. Like I hadn't publicized it very well because I've been busy, frankly, with the house move, and also because it was kind of back of mind. So I basically just showed up, plopped books down, and sold all weekend. And it was delightful in that regard. The show is very much like Comic-Con was for anyone who went there, San Diego Comic-Con, between 1998 and, say, 2004, before it really blew up in size.
Mm-hmm.
And when there was still rows and rows and rows of long box sellers. Remember when San Diego Comic-Con had that a lot?
Yes.
I don't know, Danielle. What year did you start going to San Diego Comic-Con?
I've only gone twice, and I've barely sat there. I've always been adamantly against going to San Diego Comic-Con. I have a very different opinion of it than most people.
That is more than fair. There was a time, though, I guess what I'm getting at here, for those that have never gone, that San Diego Comic-Con, before Paramount and Warner Brothers came in and bought out 100 by 100 square foot booths, which they tend to do now, there was a time when comics were still king, and this is kind of what WonderCon felt like. There were a lot of merch people there. There's no doubt about that. But there was a very healthy and large artist alley, a very healthy and large small press series of rows. And then there's a lot of publishers throughout the hall. It was a good show. It was one of the best things ever is when you walk out of the Anaheim Convention Center. It's right across the street from Disneyland. And when you walk out of the Anaheim Convention Center, what they did was they invited in about 40 or 50 food trucks, which is a new kind of trend in LA to have food trucks. But so you walk out and there's basically 50 restaurants to choose from right out front of the convention center.
That's the best.
And so they pedestrianized the, 2 city blocks in front of the convention center. So there was a bunch of places to sit and talk and eat, and there's fountains. And I got to say, Anaheim is very beautiful in and around the convention center. You throw a rock 50 feet away from the convention center and Anaheim becomes Anaheim, and it's kind of ugly, but there's a billion palm trees. Like Disney basically rolled out the money truck for that area around Disney, and it's very pretty. So it's a very pleasant show. And if you wanted to get a family experience with Comic-Con, there was a lot of families at WonderCon that you don't see at San Diego anymore, because as a dad, Brad will know, sometimes you can't make plans until the day of. And it used to be at San Diego, you could go just buy tickets at the window, and you and the 4 kids could go in right then. But now you have to be like, okay, my group is all online and we're ready to buy tickets for 2024 San Diego Comic-Con. We have to buy them in advance. Like, it's ridiculous what you have to do now to get into San Diego. And only the true super nerds have figured out, systems of how to do it, because it's impossible to get in. So WonderCon was a more family-friendly event. It was more casual. It was more comics focused, and it was a good show. I don't know if I would recommend traveling to it, but if you're in Southern California, I think it's a good one to exhibit at. And that's the 5-cent version.
If you got the same deal to do it next year, would you take them up on it?
The free booth, yes. I don't know that I would pay, just because I'm getting grumpy about how many shows that I do. And if I had paid for that, I'd feel a little grumpy about the amount of profit I would have made. Mm-hmm. But not having paid, I'm like, that was fine. That was fine. Yeah. I had a much more casual and slower show because I didn't have any of my signage. It was all NCS. Right. And I didn't do a bunch of my advance work in terms of telling readers where I would be and how I would be. So it was more just sales on the floor. But overall, I was happy with it. It was fine. And again, only because I did not pay for anything. It was great.
Right. And did you do a lot of commissions?
I did. That's something new that Danielle.
Jake
do
Parker,
you do?
Yeah, we know Jake Parker with the.
All right, slow it down.
Slow it down over there at a show. Even though Brad told him 10 years ago, do commissions, and he didn't know so. But
Brad, you don't have
Danielle. You're going to hear a lot about Jake Parker probably.
Oh, I've listened to all of your. I know. All of your recordings so far.
Danielle,
I got to tell you about Jake's smile. Do you have a minute? I just got to tell you about
the birds sing, the violins play. Holy cats!
Danielle. There's a twinkle in Jake's eye that Brad doesn't have.
I used to have a twinkle. I used to be worthy of strawberries in bed for crying.
It looks like somebody else is getting those strawberries, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh my God. I love how we tied that into the strawberries. That's great. So Danielle, I actually would like to hear Danielle's theory on commissions at comics conventions. How do you do it? Do you do caricatures? You're very good at caricatures.
Right.
How do you handle all?
I'm terrible. I'm the exact same way as I am with San Diego Comic-Con. I'm the opposite direction of everybody else. I know that I could be making a lot of money doing commissions at shows. I used to, and then I realized that I cannot. It's embarrassing. I cannot think and draw at the same time. At least. Mm-hmm. The stuff that I do and the stuff that most people expect from me is going to be some sort of comedy based, I'm not going to give them a straight, regular pinup commission. So I need to be able to think, and I can't do that at a convention. I wind up pumping out work that I'm not proud of. So I just stopped doing it entirely. However, I have and this is also counter to what most people think we should be doing. I have a little tip jar that I bring with me, and it's very open and inviting and says, please put money in me. And I just say, I have a little sign that says, donations for, or I think like donations for sketches, but it's like booze donations for sketches, just to like keep it in theme, even though I don't drink as much as I used to. That way people think like, okay, I'm buying her a drink, and they can put any amount they want in there. So if I have like a cheap young college student who's reading the comic and doesn't have a whole lot of money, they can just put in $1 and I'm going to draw them something. Somebody could put in $20, I'm going to draw them something. And I try not to pay attention to what they're giving me, actually, because I don't want it to reflect in the drawing. I just want to do a drawing for them no matter what. So that's my method. I'm sometimes thinking that I'm losing money on it, but in all honesty, every time that I've tried it, it's been way more money than I ever expected.
I love the human moment, though, of imagining you sketching and you're like, and I try not to pay attention to the money, but then 100 goes in and your eyeball catches it, and the drawing immediately slows down and becomes much better.
all of a sudden the pen goes down. She reaches underneath the table for the good pen. She brings out the Bristol board.
No, Brad, literally, like, it's like, those tiny little tripods for like oil paintings. One of those suddenly comes out on the desk. He puts on a little French beret. She's like ready to go.
Change into my striped shirt.
So Danielle, I mean, conventioning wise, have you found that the older you've gotten, the more grumpy you've gotten about doing conventions?
It makes me it warms my heart, and also makes me worried for myself that I just turned 37, and I'm feeling so old, and I can constantly relate to every time you guys use the word grumpy about yourselves. Lately, it's been different anyway. I ended my comic strip. My long-running comic strip, Girls with Slingshots, was from 2004 to 2015. And since then, I've kind of just been in this weird sabbatical that I'm paying for myself. I've just been kind of doing random things, teaching, learning. I kind of haven't had a reason to go to conventions too much. And I feel like I used to partially go to conventions to see people like you guys, like friends of mine who are cartoonists. And now it's just, they're so big and so busy that I generally don't. And I also definitely get into the point where I'm like, I want to go eat by myself at the quietest place that's within walking distance and then go to bed at 10. Definitely not my style many years ago. So I'm not seeing as many people. There's not as much reason for me to go. So I'm kind of doing like maybe 5 as opposed to like 13 or 15 that I used to do.
Yeah, you used to be kind of a road warrior when it came to comic conventions. I remember reading about you, and it would be like every weekend you'd be at a different convention.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was great, though. I mean, I was making a lot of times I was going to conventions just to like marry it in with a visit to a friend of mine who lived far away. So it was kind of partially a vacation.
While you're here, though, I wanted to specifically ask you because on the Patreon ComicLab forums, you have had some fantastic opinions lately about making a living as a cartoonist. And the one I really wanted to hit on, because it was so different from what Brad's been advocating Patreon-wise, was your theory about how to use Patreon, and specifically about exclusive art or behind the paywall, for lack of a phrase, behind the subscription wall phrase. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about your theory about how to best use Patreon.
Yeah, of course I haven't thought about it enough to give you a really good, this is going to be like a hodgepodge of things that probably contradict each other, but I'll try.
Danielle, that's us every week. You're going
to fit right in.
That's why I feel so at home here. Something that's been on my mind a lot lately has been, and I've talked to Lucy Bellwood, who you've had on your show, of course. We both have a lot of thoughts about income transparency. And this is reflected in my Patreon page because I've got, you can hide the amount that you're making. I don't. And I haven't formed a real solid opinion of why I haven't done that, but for some reason it doesn't feel right to me to hide it. I think that I kind of see Patreon as being more of like a collaborative effort between me and my patrons. And I guess I'm also kind of going about it, like I started becoming a patron of other artists before I started my own Patreon page, just to kind of guinea pig it and see how I felt about it from the patron standpoint. And for me, I actually really enjoy, and I do this for a lot of different artists, I hate the word patronize. They picked the worst name for this thing, but I'll use it, I guess. I'm a patron of many different artists who don't give exclusive content. They just want to have somebody, have people who are fans of theirs supporting them. And that's how I really enjoy doing it. Although I'm still kind of wavering between the two, because I'm still giving a lot of exclusive content, but I am I kind of wanted to shift it. And actually, I'll give you guys a little in on what I'm going to be shifting that towards pretty soon. At least I'm thinking about what I'm trying to do with Patreon soon. For right now, I'm kind of seeing it as anybody who wants to send any amount of money, I want them to be able to see anything that I post up, whether it's $1 or $5. And of course, the mess of December 2017, Patreon trying to change it so that basically they'd be not incentivizing those small donations. They're kind of trying to, the brilliance of Patreon has been the thing that we have not been able to do all this time since web cartoonists began, that we've wanted to be able to do, is to make micro donations, $1 a month or $2 a month, be worth it, considering the fees that are involved with somebody just sending $1 to you. You wind up getting 67 cents or something out of that if you're doing it through like PayPal or whatever we've had in the past. The fact that they've decided, the Patreon was like, oh, the smart way to do this would be to batch all the transactions once a month. That way, if somebody, and just get people to encourage people to be patrons of as many people as possible, many creators, so that if I'm sending $100 a month to, 100 different patrons, I'm just sending like $1 to each and every one of them. I'm only being fined for that $100. That's going to be a much smaller amount that I guess the creator actually would be fined that very small amount. It's a brilliant plan, and they wanted to get rid of that because, I don't know, they've got a different idea of what Patreon is. For me, Patreon is a way of allowing people who, no matter what their income bracket is, being able to know that they're helping out the creator that they really like. And it's kind of a mutually beneficial, like, we believe in you, we want you to be able to continue making artwork. And I can, make artwork according to how many people actually want to support that. It's kind of, I don't know. Yeah, see, it's not completely formed here. This is my my ramble.
No, but I get the spirit of what you're saying though, and I think it's interesting to contrast that with Brad, because Brad has such a. I kind of straddle between the two of you. That sounds terrible. I kind of sit between the two of you, and so it's interesting to hear Brad's take on it and your take on it, because they're not diametrically opposed, but they're just different. Right, sure. It's different strokes for different folks, and so it's interesting to hear your opinion of how to do it, which I think is a totally valid one and clearly is working, and Brad's opinion of how to do it, which is also different and clearly working.
Valid, yeah.
And it's good to see that there are many paths to the same mountain for an artist, because someone might be out there listening to Brad's opinion or your opinion going, listen, that's just not the way I imagine how my business should work. And it's good to know that there are different paths there. So thank you for elucidating on that. That's great.
Well, one thing I want to underline that Danielle said that was really something I strongly believe in, and I don't think it's a topic we've covered. And that is, if you're thinking about launching a Patreon campaign, be a patron first. Take a couple of months and just for like $1 a shot, and follow. Give yourself a maybe even a $10 budget, and call it a investment into your learning, right, for Patreon, and follow 10 different Patreon people, 10 people who either A, you respect, B, who are successful, or C, are doing something very similar to what you want to do and how you want to do it. And not only see how they're doing it from the inside, but like Danielle did, pay attention to how you feel about what they're doing, to kind of see how this, how your experience goes. I did that myself when I was starting out, and I learned so much about just seeing how people did it and whether that was going to work for me or not.
Well, because we all have that moment, and it's right to focus on the emotional, because it is ultimately an emotional decision and not a logical decision. But it's good to know when your heart goes, you know what? Yes, I would like to give money to this artist. And sometimes it's in their video. Sometimes it's in the way they describe that first paragraph of why they're on Patreon. Sometimes it's in the art samples that they have. And it's good for you to know when you're setting up your Patreon or Kickstarter or whatever you're doing, what the trigger moments were for another artist that you're backing. Mm-hmm. So I would second that as well. And I think in general that Danielle and Brad's advice to basically dip a toe in as though you were a user first is great strategy anytime there's a new social media platform too. I did that same thing when I started doing Instagram 6 months ago, is that I just started following people on Instagram and figuring out what this platform was, because I was not personally familiar with it. And I didn't want to do that faux pas of basically, someone who's new to a platform that comes in like your grandmother and does all the postings wrong and socially says all the wrong things that are for that platform just don't work.
Right.
And so I just wanted to see what the inner language of that platform was and what the sort of quietly accepted strategies were that people used before I came in there like a bull in a china shop going, hey, everybody read my comic, that kind of thing. So I would advise that for any social media platform and for any distributed fundraising platform. Danielle's advice is great, to just sort of dip a toe in as a user first before you go in as a creator.
Yeah. So speaking of Danielle and how kind she's been to be active on our Patreon page, Danielle, you had a couple thoughts from last week's question asker, that said he's
Wow, question
well,
asker.
I didn't. What's? I was blanking on a good way to say that.
That's what I would have done.
Isn't it questioner? Isn't that the way you say
Questioner.
it?
Well, questioner sounds like. Well, I guess questioner.
Profession.
That sounded a little aggressive, like interrogator.
You're right. I think the better version was question asker.
Okay.
Hey Danielle, on last week's show you had a question asker that you done answered. Can we get your word opinions on that? The ones that came from your mouth?
Well, as a question answerer, I can give you an answer to that.
I'll tell you. Actually, you could do the better West Virginia accent. Probably.
I don't even know what that was actually.
Well, listen, we had somebody ask a question last week.
Yay! There you go.
I'll cut all that other stuff out. And he says, I'm coming over. If I wanted to come over from Australia and only had one comic convention to go to, which one would it be? We both had answers, and you weighed in on the Patreon page with some really good advice. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to share that
Ooh, I
here.
have to remember what that advice was. I know I definitely said TCAF, and of course now I'm thinking, I don't remember if he said North American show he was looking for or a U.S. show.
He was looking for like a North America show,
cool.
I guess.
I mean, yeah, like I think Dave happened to mention like, oh, well, it wouldn't really matter which direction, like which country he's going to. He's going to a different country that's far away either way. So I would recommend TCAF, but I'm also saying this as somebody who definitely does not make a Safe for Kids comic. You know, my stuff is, I've worked on some Adventure Time, and that has sold really well at TCAF, so I guess that does kind of reflect. But as far as I know, from what I can see, and I know like Raina Telgemeier is always at TCAF, and, you know, there are a lot of other artists who are doing stuff for kids.
After that, you also had some thoughts on a Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, my first thought, I don't know. I'm always just trying to bundle. I was brought up very frugally. And so my first thought every time that I have to do something that's going to be very expensive is how can I make this as like, probably as maybe not stressful, but as like packed in and just ridiculous as possible, but it'll still work. So I'm just going to give you the background on like what I did a couple years ago, 2014. I hadn't quite ended Girls with Slingshots, but I knew I was going to pretty soon. I decided instead of like, there were all these people who were mostly in the Midwest actually asking me to do conventions out there. And I knew I'd heard from about a lot of the conventions or not heard at all about these conventions to the point where I was thinking, this is not going to be a moneymaker for me to go to like Detroit Comic Con. I didn't feel like I was probably going to make money at that one. And just hearing stories from other, like I'd been to an Ohio convention that I didn't do well at. And like, it's like, I can't really justify going to these Midwest conventions, but I obviously have a lot of readers out there. Why don't I just like pick out a couple of conventions I might do, but then also just do a ton of signings along the way. I've been meaning to do this for a while. I love driving. I love road trips. I love traveling. So I planned out this huge cross-country road trip where I was just going to be bringing my books, selling my books at these comic book shops, at in some places like a cigar and wine shop, wherever I could find that I could sell these books at legally. I would just pick these places out and make this huge map of where I was going to go. And the trick of it was making a huge deal out of it. And of course, you know, I also wanted to help hopefully pay for some of it being kind of a risky idea since I'd never done it before, planning the signing tour. I figured I might want to go in risk free and go ahead and kickstart just the basics, like the hotels, the gas. I just kind of like wrote out everything that was probably going to cost money and I can't remember how much my goal was. It might've been 10 grand, just saying like, this is how much I need to do this road trip. If you guys are on any of these stops, you know, you'll be able to come out and see me. And if you're interested in me coming out, this is again, just kind of being like, if this is something that's worth doing, you can tell me with your money, essentially, if this is worth it for you. So I just kind of planned this road trip, planned out the Kickstarter, said, you know, send money if you're interested in me coming out there, made way more than I needed to. And that actually allowed me to be able to fly out assistants also. So, I mean, this is a huge scale thing. I don't know what the Australian situation is or what his fan base is like out here. But at the very least, I would plan out, you know, whatever convention you're going to, plan out a bunch of signings around the area. Because at this point, I'm actually starting to think that signings for me, at least, are going to be way more lucrative than doing conventions at this. I don't know. And again, like I'm not really seeing my friends when I go to conventions as often as I used to. Signings, I've actually been planning them around where my friends live. and being able to stay with them for, a night or two and actually seeing them while I'm on my trip.
And so for folks not familiar with signing at comic shops, what was the retail split that you would do for the average comic shop?
So this was complicated because I've been kind of a diva for many years where I've always self-published my books, and they've never been available through Diamond, or I don't know how to do any of that stuff. Right. The stuff you're supposed to do, I'm completely unaware of how to do it. So none of my stuff was actually available at the bookstores. And I actually got my first taste of a bit of humility and realizing like you can't just expect people to like bow down to you here in my own town, because I had like a kickoff signing in my town at the bookstore in town, and it's not a comic book store, it's just a regular bookstore. And they were kind of like, okay, so we'll order blah blah blah, and I was like, well, no, you can't order them. And they're like, well, how will we make money if you're going to be selling it? Like, why would we support this? I'm like, oh, that's a
why would we let you in the door?
That's a good question. I don't know. I never thought about it from your end, which is really selfish of me. So what I wound up doing for me is I still don't know how you're supposed to split them when they're actually available in bookstores. I'm going to be learning that this year. For me, since I had to bring my stuff with me, bring my books with me to sell at the bookstore. I made a special print that a lot of people really wanted. A lot of the fans really wanted. And it was also kind of a generic, like anybody would maybe like this. Anybody who likes books would like this. It was like a librarian print. And I made it available only if the person in line showed me a receipt from that store from that day. So they'd have to, I would tell them, like, if you want to, you can slip in really quickly. Like, you didn't know this coming up to the line, and, you've been in line for like 20 minutes or whatever. So if you want to, you can go over and buy something right now. You just buy a gift for somebody from this store that's been so kind to host me, and come back really quickly. You can cut the line and just show me the receipt, and I'll give you the print really quickly.
This is genius.
Yeah, it worked out so well. I'm going to do it again because it just worked out so damn well.
And comic shops then didn't take a cut of the GWS
Not at all.
book. They just
luckily every other store didn't even ask. I know.
That's very interesting. I'm surprised they bid on that.
Well, to be honest, this was the only the store in town was the only one that I needed to like. I was like, oh shit, I need to come up with something that I can like incentivize them. And they made $500 that night. And it's a small town. It's like 2,000 people in this town. So I guarantee that was good for them over a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Other stores didn't even ask. I actually just kind of made sure that whatever store I was signing at, somebody there knew who I was and was like, oh yeah, no, she'll bring in a lot of people. We'll go ahead and do it. We're not even asking for a cut or anything like that. Just go ahead and bring your stuff. We know you're going to bring people over.
Right. Because, there is truth to that too. Like if I went down to my local comic shop, which I only go to maybe 2 times a year to come as a Danielle fan, I would probably pick something else up while I was there. Like
right?
As a lover of comics, you're in the door. You're like, oh, I'll go get Saga or something,
Right.
So that makes sense.
Or chances are they've got, if they're like most bookstores and a lot of comic shops, they've got some kind of food on premises, either a coffee shop or something like that. So you could also argue that.
Well, good for you for doing that. That's I have to tell you that when I saw you doing that Kickstarter, I was so excited for you because I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, Danielle, but I've mentioned it to Brad. One of my long-standing dreams, and it's going to sound goofy, but I want to rent a very large RV.
Oh, yeah.
Stock it with 4 or 5 cartoonist friends and just go around the country. And literally, sometimes we'll just be in a big, beautiful summer park and we'll say, hey, we're going to be at Holiday Park in Des Moines, Iowa from 1 to 3, and like just set up a couple tables, do a signing in a public park, and then go on to the next town. I think that would be so fun to go around the country.
I'm in.
Yes.
I'm in before Brad.
I've had the same fantasy. I've had the exact same, except mine involves, while my kids are still relatively young, taking them on a summer road trip and just going, hitting comic convention after comic convention. And then in the weekdays in between, travel and stop at weird roadside attractions and stuff like that, and stop at different places.
Well, now, wait a minute.
Interest.
If this is all 3 of our fantasy, we could make this happen somehow where... just hear me out. We don't have to be in the same RV, but we could all agree to be at Des Moines at the Holiday Park at 1 o'clock on the 21st. And then on the 23rd, we all agree to be at Kansas. And you know what I mean? Then you can take your own time and circuitous path to get down to Kansas City.
I like that.
And then get up to Detroit. And it might be kind of fun. I'm just going to percolate on that one. Because this is a version of Ryan North's Friendship Island. Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, when we have Ryan on the show, I'll make him tell the story better. But his adult fantasy fantasy is to get a small island or a very large mansion and stock it with friends, and they all live together on Friendship Island.
This is actually my retirement plan.
It's kind of the most Ryan North idea ever,
Oh man,
Friendship Island.
I'm in on it.
I really love it.
It sounds great.
Now, listen, one question real quick. You were saying, you'd never had to do a retail split and stuff like that. Was that one of the reasons that huge Girls with Slingshots, the big anthology book, was published through Iron Circus?
Yes, and that is exactly the reason why. I mean, also, I just believe in the stuff that she's been putting out has been great, and I want to be a part of that. But
Yeah.
and I've known Spike for like a decade now, so yeah, I don't know anything about distribution. Actually, now that we're talking about this, I'm like, oh, what is the split? Because I'm going to be doing 3 different road trips probably this year, and it only occurred to me 3 days ago. I was like, oh shit. If these things are available through Consortium, which they're going to be, I don't know what I'm supposed to. I bought 1,000 units myself to sell, and I'm like, oh, how am I am I supposed to not go to comic book shops and try something else? Because I think it'd be kind of rude to be like, hey, I'm going to bring my own books, and even though you can buy them and make more money by having me sign. Can you guys shed some light on this? Because I don't know what's going on.
Well, so here's where we have to have 2 small wooden chairs facing each other, and we hold your hands and go, Danielle, the split's not great. We're just holding your hand and staring into your eyes. We go, I am so sorry what I'm about to tell you about the split. Because when Brad and I heard your idea about like just buy something in the store, I can guarantee you Brad's jaw fell like my jaw fell, which is like, what a great idea that they fell for it. That's amazing.
I still can't believe they went for it, but it's great if you can pull it off.
I couldn't order my books, so there was only one way to get them in. That was through me, and my rule went.
No, listen, the level of Brad and I are legitimately impressed by the level of chutzpah that you had in doing this because it's amazing.
I didn't even know that I had that chutzpah. I just thought I was doing something normal.
Why wouldn't you, like, for example, here? So if you're really looking for strategies, one thing you could do is to go to that bookstore and say, I'm the distributor. I'll sell you these books for 60% off the cover price. You give the money to me.
Oh.
We sell them. They go through your inventory. So now you can track the sales and all like that. At the end of the night, if you've got extra books, you can either put them into stock or you can buy those back.
You sign and leave it for them. That's one way to do it. But Brad, I would even say in person that I don't think you need to give a 60% discount. You can give as little as a 40% discount when you're in person.
Oh, hell yeah.
It depends. It depends on the store. But I don't think you have to go as high as 60 because that's kind of the
God, I am such a dick. I'm like, no, I would never do that. What are you thinking?
I love the idea that Danielle's standing in the store with a shiv. Like, no, fuck you. No, we're not doing that.
I would say it nicely. I just hold the shiv up really high.
Right in the eye level.
Oh, jeez.
Listen, I'm small, but I'm mighty. 40%.
So actually, I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but if there were a few places that made me realize while I was trying to do, I had 2 different, interns working with me when I did that huge cross-country tour, I should mention, because that's really what made it possible for me to do this in the first place. When they were calling around to help me try to find venues for the signings, that's when I started realizing there were a couple places that either weren't familiar with me or weren't even comic book stores, they're regular bookstores. And they're just like, we need to explain something to you here. I don't know who you think you are, just wanting to come in here and sell your stuff 100% without us getting a cut. So those places, when I couldn't find a bookstore in a town I already promised to sign in, I found something unusual to some other place to sign in. I've done bars. I've done, actually, Just Fink and I have done laser tag before, and we had a great time. We just rented out a party room for $100 and just.
Oh, that's great.
We had the best.
Amazing.
I'm going to try to do that again this time. She lives in near Albany in New York, so I'm going to try to do that again this time. We actually. We rented the room, and she's like, it's $100. I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's way cheaper for both of us than a comic or a convention. And by the end of it, we had like 40 nerds come out and do laser tag with us. And we go up to pay the guy for the party room. And the guy was like, no, forget it. It's free. We didn't think you were going to bring this many people. So, I mean, we're going to try to.
Well, now that you're talking about this, think about it. How many bars have banquet rooms?
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Well, okay. So can I jump in on this one? So every time I do a book launch party, the one thing I do is I find a bar or restaurant around LA, and I find a night that the bar, I say, what's your slowest night?
Yes.
And they'll say Tuesday night. And I say, I want your back room, and I guarantee you I'll get at least 200 people in here buying drinks on a Tuesday night. And they're like, all yours. Yeah. And then I say, all I need is 2 long tables and the space. And they're like, absolutely. And then what I do is, in addition to the bar, I also get a food or a drink sponsor. So it encourages people to come out. They're already buying drinks, but they'll have like some either free food item or free drink item that doesn't compete with the bar. You just have to clear it with the bar. And they're so excited to get 200 people coming out. They're so excited to have their space being used that you get a free book launch party space and you get some extra food or drink items for people.
Man,
and bang,
that
you
is
got a free
brilliant.
party.
Thank you.
It's
I'm writing
amazing.
all this down.
I remember you talking about that back in the Webcomics Weekly days, and I've wanted to do that ever since, and I've never been able to pull it off. Like, I've never been able to actually make that first call even, because I'm convinced that nobody's going to show up. But it's such a great idea.
I'll tell you, Brad, that like many things in life, it's much better to do it in person than it is over the phone. So you got to walk into the bar, you got to sit and order a beer, and you go, hey, who's the manager on? And they go, oh, Greg, let me go get him. And you go, hey, Greg, I'm Brad Geiger. Hey, listen, I'm a local cartoonist. I wanna bring some people in for a book signing. What's your slowest night, and do you have a back room? And then obviously you don't pitch it that clumsily, but that's the basic idea. And then you have a conversation. I was like, what makes it worth it for you financially to how many people do I have to bring in? And he'll go, I don't know, 50. And you say, okay, 50 people buying drinks. That's probably $250, $500 for you for a bar. Okay, great. I can get 50 people in. I guarantee that. So, and if I don't, how about this? I'll give you a minimum. If I only bring in 40 people, if I only bring in whatever it is, 150 people, I'll even cover the minimum if it doesn't get to what you need it to be. But then what'll happen is you'll get the people in and they'll be like, oh gosh, we didn't anticipate this. This is great. What ended up happening the last couple of times I got a space is not only did I have enough people, but the bar was actually sending me over drinks while I was signing because they're like, oh, we're so thankful that you brought in this many people. This is fantastic.
Great.
Right. And so it's a great way to work it. You just have to figure out like what is in a business's interest, and then you fulfill that interest and marry it to your needs. And so it's great for signings in that regard. But that's why I'm so impressed by Danielle using a laser tag, because I'd never thought about, because one of the downsides for me for Friendship Road Trip is that if I'm doing it in a public park, in a small enough town, there's going to be a cop that rolls up and goes, hey, wait a minute, you need a license if you're going to be selling in a park, like that. It's eventually going to happen. But what's brilliant about Danielle's idea is it's behind a closed door. Everybody's in. If you're selling a book, no cop is going to go into a laser tag place. He's no adult is going to come rolling in.
You just stick to like Chuck E. Cheese's and the like, and you're fine.
Right. By the way, have you ever seen when a laser tag place turns on the lights? It's so skeevy looking inside.
No, I don't even want to think about this.
It's like whenever you're in a pub and it's like 3 a.m. and they turn the lights on and you're like, oh God, take a mop to this place. Jeez Louise.
The best part about that laser tag place, and I need to give the credit, that was totally Jess's idea, is because she loves laser tag and now I do too, is that we were mostly fighting or, laser tagging against like 7-year-olds, and behind closed doors in between sessions, Jess and I are selling like, she's got a porn comic and I've got like nothing but drinking and sex. It's like, here we are. Nobody knows we're behind a door. It's fine.
That's amazing. So, well, speaking of having fun with friends in a consequence-free environment, let's talk about Facebook for a minute, because that's what I want.
That's the best transition yet.
Because it's not like anyone's ending democracy recently. So anyway, let's talk about Facebook. So I want to talk to both of you because I rarely get fussy enough where I want to make a dramatic decision that would affect my business. But Facebook's recent moves, and let's be honest, a little bit even Google's data sharing moves, have become a little panopticon in the sense that the amount of data that they have on you and the amount that they are willing to share with you, at least in the past years, has gotten a little bit egregious, not a little bit, a lot egregious, to the point where I am honestly considering deleting my Facebook account. And I'm very aware as I go into it, the pluses and minuses of it. But I would like to hear from both of you before I elucidate a little bit too much on it, what your thoughts are on an artist, not necessarily a person, but an artist deleting their Facebook account. Is it cutting off your nose to spite your face, or is it a good move in light of a company's egregious moves? Brad or Danielle, take it away.
Oh God, I don't even know. In all honesty, I haven't really paid much attention to the things that have been happening. I'm terrible. I'm the worst person. I kind of don't care about the data sharing thing, which is awful. My best friend is involved in her whole focus is on data protection. I don't know. All my information's already out there. I'm sure for other people it totally makes sense, and it would make sense for me to support. Do not let them get your. I don't know. all my information is already available. I don't care about that portion. I care about how much time Facebook can suck out of your life and how it can be, depressing and horrible. And I've made moves to change Facebook for myself as an experience for that. But the data sharing thing, I don't have much opinion on, actually.
And so right now, Danielle, just to be clear, are you using Facebook or do you not even have a Facebook account?
I do. I don't use it that much. I don't use it the same way other people do. I use Chrome, and I've got the little, all the things I visit on a daily basis are up at the very top in little icons. My Facebook page actually goes to, quaintly, the community page for my tiny little town with 2,000 people in it, because I use it to, find out what's going on in town or ask people to borrow things, whatever. It's like a little neighborhood sharing website, essentially. So my homepage essentially for Facebook goes to that, and I only receive notifications of things that I've chosen to get notifications for. That's pretty much how I use it. I don't have it on my phone. I refuse to install Messenger or whatever. There's just no way I'm going to have that in my life.
Okay, that's fair. And now, Brad, what are your thoughts on Facebook? Are you currently on Facebook, and do you have pluses or minuses?
Yeah, listen, I think we were all probably early adopters to Facebook. In short, my thought is this: no, I'm not going to delete my Facebook account. I do want to make sure that I am electing the sort of people who will hold Facebook accountable for what they're doing. But I am not going to delete my Facebook account. And I'll tell you why. My Aunt Susie should quit her Facebook account. Now that I am all in favor of, because she's the one that's sending me all the Farmville requests. She's the one that's taking all those inane personality tests. Her and Uncle Phil are oversharing like crazy. She and he should delete their Facebook accounts. That's a step in the right direction. But for somebody who's using Facebook to promote, and that's what the three of us are doing for the most part. We're promoting. And when we're sharing, it's just so that we can promote to you tomorrow, right? Every share that we do isn't really because we want to share with you. It's because we want you sitting in that chair when we promote tomorrow.
Right.
And this goes for Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the other ones. We've been building up that social media presence for years, day by day by day. The whole reason we've been there is so that we could use it as the amazing promotional tool that it is. I am not going to throw that overboard very easily. I'm going to be judicious in how I use it, but I am not going to throw that account that I've built for so long overboard. It's just not going to happen. Now, if enough Aunt Susie's and Uncle Phil's delete their Facebook account to the extent that it's not a useful promotional tool, then I'll delete Facebook. But for as long as Facebook does what I want it to do, and that's allow me to promote and network and get out messages that I need to get out for my comic, then you've got to keep Facebook. Otherwise, you very much are, Dave, as you said, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
So I super see your point, and I agree with you in large swaths of it, is that I knew the devil's bargain that I was making anytime I enter in with Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of the Google platforms, because it's like that old saying, if you're not paying for a product, then you're the product. And in this case, anytime we use social media platform, we're not paying for it, which means the product that's being sold is our information. And in this case, Google advertising or Facebook advertising or Twitter advertising, they are gathering up information on you so to sell you like a product, either your profile, or a psychographic profile, demographic profile, or advertising profile. So I understand that going in the devil's bargain that we made. And that even if I were to cut off Facebook, that Google has probably a few dozen gigs, if not 100 gigs of data on me. Twitter probably has a couple gigs of data on me. Instagram has a couple, you know what I mean? Like all these together, they're individually and collectively, they have virtually everything that you could want to know about Dave Kellett on their servers, right? So I get that, but to me, it's a couple things. One is the diminishing return that Facebook is bringing me as a cartoonist. And by that, I mean the tilt towards algorithmic sharing on a lot of these platforms, and Facebook is the most egregious, is if I want to, let's say I have, I don't know what it is, but let's just say I have 10,000, 5,000 followers on Facebook, right? If I go to share a cartoon for free with Facebook for those 5,000 followers, maybe 1,500, maybe 1,200 will see it at any given time because Facebook has put a governor on how many of those people see my stuff, right? And then the trade-off there is that in response, they're also getting all that data on all those people's likes, dislikes, uses, and shares. They get it on my ability to share it and likes and dislikes and so they're getting an awful lot of data for me not actually reaching those 5,000 people. And so, and then in coming to find out just how inappropriate the level of sharing was in the last 5 or 6 years that Facebook has had with third parties that I never entered into an agreement with, even though that was in the terms of agreement with Facebook. It just seems like I'm giving up an awful lot to not actually reach the people I want to reach.
I use it really differently than I just realized this is, I don't use it the way an artist normally would, or, a commercial artist kind of like what we usually do. I don't share. I pretty much exclusively use Facebook for my Aunt Susie's and Uncle Phil's. It's pretty much just to keep in touch with. So there's not a whole lot that I write that I want them reading. So I don't share a whole lot up there, actually. I generally, as far as my business goes, I'll use it for mentioning, just kind of like scoop up the rest of the people who haven't heard it elsewhere, especially friends and family who are actually fans of the comic strips that I do, letting people know when I'll be at a show or a signing nearby them, or that there's a new book out and here's how to buy it or something like that. That's pretty much it. I just do it once in a while just to remind people that I'm doing this in case they're interested in it. That's it.
Yeah. So for me, social media in general kind of feels like before the Food and Drug Administration was established. And I don't know if you guys know the history of this, but like the FDA was established kind of in early 1910, 1905, something like that. And it happened because there was this huge public outrage about how food, which traditionally you would go to your local butcher or to your local farmer's market and you would buy at the local level. And if you got food poisoning from your butcher, you knew your butcher and you would go, "What the hell, Jim? You sold me that pork and you knew it was bad." And Jim's like, "Oh God, I'm sorry." Right. But then what happened is, as food started to get massively distributed, you would have these Chicago butchers that were like terrible conditions. People were dying in the butcheries, and then they would ship out the food and people would be dying from the food that got shipped out, So you had all this stuff, and there's a whole reason why Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. It's because it was terrible. Like, it was literally terrible. You had the commodification of food, and it got really bad, and no one was governing it. And so finally the government, there's a huge outcry, and the government said, "Damn it, we're going to establish the FDA, and we're going to regulate food." And I feel like the same thing is happening now with data, is that at first things are a wild west and everybody can do whatever they want with data and it's fine, it's no big deal. But then an outcry will reach a certain point, and as a community, as a government, a self-governing body, we as citizens will say, all right, this has gotten ridiculous. We have to regulate this. Everybody's abusing this mass use of data, because it used to be data was local. You went to your Yellow Pages, and if they got your name wrong, you called them up and said, "Hey, you spelled Geiger wrong," and they would fix it, right? So now that data has become mass commodified, it's exactly like food in the 1880s, 1890s, is that you get bigger companies coming in and trying to do it the cheapest way and the most profitable way to them, but it screws the public. And I feel like we've now reached a point where it's starting to become a point where artists and citizens have to say, no, this is not the way we need data to be used. There needs to be more regulation. And I think towards that, I don't know. For the first time in my artistic career, I feel like, okay, now I got to start putting my foot down about how my and my readers' data is being used.
Well, I don't mind that at all, and in a lot of what you said there, I agree with. However, from a pragmatic standpoint, your deleting your Facebook account isn't going to bring us any closer to any kind of regulation. And number two, from a business standpoint, listen, you can't get rid of that. You can't get rid of Facebook or Twitter or any of the others until you have something in place to replace it with. And if you don't, then you're going to have some serious problems that you're going to have to overcome. And even though Facebook gives you limited returns, we all know how the algorithm works. It doesn't get out to everybody that you're friends with, but you still have a message getting out. So you are still connecting with some of them. And you've also got the chance of it, if enough of them are interested in what you're saying and interact with it, then it can get a lot more exposure than it would have. Those are still in play. And they're still useful.
Right.
And until you can replace those, you'd be very ill-advised to get rid of one of them.
I slightly disagree with one thing, and it's only that you said, like, Dave, getting rid of your Facebook doesn't make any difference. It does. I think we underestimate small changes do make a huge difference if a lot of people do it. And I think that I feel like I just saw a headline. I didn't actually read, as I said, I'm not very educated on this whole topic right now, but I feel like I did see one headline that was saying something about like Facebook's shares going down or something like that, or like somehow people failing ship has affected, and every little person does count for that. It does make a statement.
Well, yeah, and so I want Brad. I completely hear what you're saying. That you're saying as an individual act.
Not Dave Kellett. No, come back.
Oh no, we lost Dave Kellett, but he's cartoonist with a couple thousand followers. Oh no.
Alert Zuckerberg.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I can't buy the solid gold car. I have to buy the 99% solid gold car. I agree with you, but amongst a handful of actions that a lot of citizens could take, that being one of them, another one being electing different people with different sets of data opinions. But those two actions as a 1-2 punch from the commercial side and from the legislative side, I think is a good way. And I know this is a bigger picture than we can tackle on ComicLab. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I think my final solution is I'm really going to reduce my personal footprint on Facebook to like literally an account that has a photo on it that says, "Hi, I'm not on Facebook," so that no one messages me. But then use that account to manage the Sheldon website page, whatever that thing's called on Facebook, so that so I can still share it there. I think that's where I'm netting out, Brad, to answer your point about you can't just abandon it. But in my heart of hearts, though, if I'm being honest about it, I feel like that's not making enough of a statement to Facebook about how displeased I am with their Wild West attitude towards data sharing.
I don't know. That's less ad revenue from you. I mean, obviously, again, it's very, very small, but it's still less ad revenue they're getting from you because you're not looking at the site as much.
Yes, and in general, I'm taking over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I'm not giving them any fresh data that they can market and sell with.
Right.
So now let me ask you this: Facebook owns Instagram.
Right.
Yes.
And you're getting a lot better results on Instagram than you're getting on Facebook. But there's no reason to believe that Instagram is doing anything different in terms of data collection. So will you be closing your Instagram down anytime soon?
So that is a great question.
Evil question.
No, for me, no. This is very intentional on my part. I have set up my Instagram very differently than any use I ever had for Facebook. There's nothing personal on Instagram. There's no data that they have. They don't know. I mean, granted, Facebook already knows it, but they don't know what college I went to, what job I had, where I live. They just see a new comic going up every day, and then my unique tags that I put with it, and that's it. That's all they get from me data-wise.
Yeah. However, do you have an Android phone?
No, but I have an iPhone, and I know there's also a billion apps that leak data onto servers there. Yes, to answer your point.
We're just finding out. This is just an example. We're just finding out within the last couple of days that somebody downloaded what Facebook had on him, and he had an Android phone. Through the Facebook app, they were charting who he made phone calls to, what time those phone calls were made, and how long the phone calls lasted. In other words, just having this stuff on your phone, in some cases, allows them to do data mining way beyond what you're putting on the app yourself.
Right.
In other words, they're getting access to a whole lot of stuff that you don't even intend them to.
Well, and that's why I say deleting Facebook is just one drop in an overall river of data that we're giving away already. So I get that. That's why I'm saying I understand that in some respects I would be cutting off my nose to spite my face, but all these data leaks could eventually cause legitimate problems for your life when you go to apply for health insurance or a mortgage, or you go for a job and your employer has access to third-party data that you didn't know they had access to. And so they can see that you were hanging out at a marijuana dispensary a lot. And they're like, well, wait a minute, your Google Maps tracking seems to show you there a lot. What's that all about? That kind of thing. I'm just these are basic examples, but you get where I'm going with about how someone could reject you for health insurance or a job or some sort of public service or something because of your past data use or something. So I get that Facebook is just one thing, but what I'm saying is I think we've reached a tipping point as a society where we're realizing that it was too much of the Wild West, like mass food commodification was in the 19th century, and that now we're realizing that regulation has to come stepping in because some of this data, not all of it, as Danielle said, a lot of my stuff, it's who cares? I don't care what people know what I read. But the thing is, some future employer might care what I read, or some health insurance person might care where I've shopped or where I've been, and so a lot of those concerns do come in when it starts to have real world impact on your life, Anyway, long story short, I'm going to limit down my Facebook account, but to more how I use Instagram just for the comic. And I think as an artist, that personally is the best way for me to manage what is still the Wild West in terms of data sharing. by bigger companies.
So now the question becomes, and Danielle, I want to hear you on this particularly, because let's say you're giving advice to a young web cartoonist, somebody that's listening to ComicLab right now who's starting out, or they're young in that they've only been doing web comics for a little bit. And the primary thing that they're all concerned with is, how do I get the word out? If you don't listen to any of these guys at comic conventions and stuff, the number one thing is a woman comes up to me at a comic convention, the first thing out of her mouth, how do I get the word out about my webcomic? If you're not going to use social media, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Or that may have been an evil way to put it. So let me take the framework off of that. What would your advice be, knowing that that social media is a devil's
it's
bargain,
funny because
as
actually
Dave put it?
the advice I generally give to people when they ask if, how do you get the word out, is none of it winds up being social media, actually. It's mostly, go to conventions. It's funny because Dave said this several times already today. Whatever you do in person is going to make so much more of an impact than anything that you can do through email or social media. Well, I think that, but I'm just one person. But I feel like just making sure that, when people meet you, you have business cards on hand. I have two different kinds of business cards. One is a personal one. One is just the Girls with Slingshots one. And I make it a little bit, it's all art heavy, and it, has my writing, personality style in it. And I just hand those out constantly. And you would not believe how many people wind up finding me through just my business card that I hand out at conventions. So I don't know how other people are going to do it, though. Like it's such a different world than it was when we started. The internet's so much bigger than it was when we were doing our first comics, that it's really different for people starting out.
Well, let me make this question, turn it more personal then. When you start a new project in the next 6 to 18 months, how will you get the word out about it?
I lucked out. Something that we didn't get to talk about that hopefully maybe we can in the future is ending a long running comic. When I ended Girls with Slingshots that day, and I can't believe I didn't do it up to this point, but it worked out just fine that I hadn't. I finally set up, I can't stand MailChimp. It makes me crazy, but I finally set up a MailChimp thing and got a mass mailing thing set up so that in the comments below, on the blog section below my comic, my very last comic, I said, hey, here's my ending. Here's what I'm going to tell you. But also, before I say that, here is where you can sign up for my newsletter. I never had one before. If you guys want to know what I do next, go ahead and sign up. And I had something like 12,000 people sign up immediately. I now have 15,000 people on that list.
Wow.
That is I'm willing to pay the amount that I have to pay for that, because it's completely worth it. It's just a direct thing. I don't send out more than one a month, and I always make them a comic, actually. I go ahead and take the time to make it into a comic instead of a big block of text, because nobody wants to read a big block of text. Links are down below, but it's basically people just getting one free comic that's about what I'm doing that month and what I'm doing next and how to get the books or whatever I'm doing. That's my main way to get in touch with people.
That's brilliant. That's legitimately brilliant about how to end a strip and maintain that. Because that's always the big fear. Like with Brad, the way he did it when he ended a strip is, Brad, you had another strip already in the queue and like, hey, let's transition you over to this one as an audience, right? Is that how you did it?
Right. Mine was more of a spin-off than it was completely ending it. And that's because I was in a very much different situation than Danielle was. Danielle was ending a popular comic that had tremendous support. When I ended Greystone Inn, it was under much different circumstances. I had gotten to the point where I realized that this just wasn't working, and that I had made a lot of mistakes in developing this feature that was just going to hold it back long term. So what you saw with the way I did it was very much saying, okay, we're going to clear out a whole bunch of the flotsam, and this thing is going to become very much hyper-focused on what had previously been a storyline. And that was my way of kind of ending it and starting a new thing. But yeah, for me, Greystone Inn ended on a Friday, and Evil Inc. launched the following Monday.
Oh wow!
So there was, and as a matter of fact, I ran Evil Inc. on the Greystone Inn site as well as on the Evil Inc. site concurrently for a number of months until finally passing it off.
That's smart, and you just continually kept saying. Were you kind of continually saying, hey, by the way, this site's ending, but the same strip can be read over here? That's really brilliant.
Exactly right, yeah.
Hats off to both of you, because the ability to say, hey, this particular part of my career is ending, but I don't want to lose you. And you both were savvy enough to set up a way to capture 70, 80, 90% of those readers before you moved on to the next one. And that's really brilliant. I'm really, it's like I'm proud of both of you. I'm proud of you.
Oh, thanks,
Good
Dad.
job.
Well, I think that's the fear that everybody has, and that's the fear that keeps people from ending a comic that they know they should end, is that they're scared that no one's going to follow them to the next thing. And I think we've got to do as much as we can as creators who have been around for a little while to assure the newer people coming up that that's not only okay, but it's completely necessary. This thing that you started, your first webcomic, is probably not going to be the comic that you do for the rest of your life, and that's okay. And if your work is good, people are going to follow you to the next thing. They just will.
Right.
Right.
Well, when we were growing up, there was a half dozen to a dozen cartoonists who did it 30, 40, 50 years,
Yes.
Schultz being the most famous example. Do either of you think that there is any web cartoonist that's going to do a title their entire life?
Ooh, that's a good question. Huh.
We don't have to name names, but I'm just curious to see if that is still a possibility.
Exactly, because I'm going through a bunch of names. They're just, boy, I think let me put it to you this way. I think there's a couple that have the potential to do that, although I don't know whether that's what they want for their careers.
Right.
I think most of us are savvy enough to kind of know when we're right to end it. I mean, we're not under any kind of contract like any syndicated cartoonist would have been. We're the only ones relying on our income for the most part, right? So it's not as devastating to anybody else besides ourselves.
But it also raises the question that I wonder, had you been able to sit down Schultz or Davis or somebody that has gone for decades and decades and say, hey, listen, take the money out of the equation. If you could end it tomorrow, would you end it? I'd be curious to see what their answer would be, But the problem is, it's kind of like riding a tiger. Is once you've gotten on to making that many tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year, it's kind of hard to walk away from that on any. It'd be like, hey, I want to do that Snoopy spinoff that I've always thought of, and not do Peanuts anymore. You know what to do? I'll just write that there's 7 Snoopy cousins. That's what we'll do instead of spinning it off.
And I'll just do the strip with
exactly. I'll do a meta strip. I don't know that the conditions of syndication were so specific that once you had broken in and once you had made the big time, I kind of feel like there was a guilt in ending it.
Sure.
Watterson got legitimate shit for ending it because he was at the top of his game but frankly, it's no different than what we do now in terms of going, you know what, I'm just not feeling it anymore. I'm going to try something else. It's just an interesting change of careers, I think.
I think you're absolutely right.
What a great lull that we'll cut out. That's delightful.
Actually, my cat is trying to knock over a food dish, and I'm just watching it, so making sure it doesn't fall onto water.
Well, we are at 1:06, so do you want to, is this a good place to wrap things up?
I think it is.
You guys anyway at this point. Just I wish we could go for another hour, honestly.
Well, yeah, we've got plenty of topics.
And don't forget, for everybody that's on Patreon and not on Patreon, Danielle will be joining us for a Pro Tips. And really, we haven't mentioned it in a while, but the Pro Tips are amazing little 15 to 25 minute additional podcasts that we do for Patreon backers that just give pro tips at the advanced level and at the 101 level. So if you want more of this conversation, that we'll be talking with Danielle in just a second in our terms, and maybe just a minute in your terms, on the Pro Tips episode.
Dave, if you hear that music, you know that it means one thing, and that's that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living through comics.
Our special guest this week has been Danielle Corsetto of girlswithslingshots.com, and you'll also go want to check her out on Patreon. She's got some amazing work that she's sharing there on Patreon. And your hosts this week have been the ever-delightful Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, co-director of Shrift and and now, see, I did it.
Shrift! I'm the co-director of Shrift!
And co-director.
Hey, Dave, Brad, Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates when you were the co-director of Shrimp.
co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/Comic Lab.